2024 was quite the year. I mean, just from an elections perspective alone, it was jam-packed, and it really set the stage for some interesting happenings for Africa in 2025. And to talk about the trends that ETM will be following, I'm joined by our co-head for Africa, Takudzwa Ndawona. Tux, thank you very much for joining me. Of course, certainly the biggest thing to come out of 2024, and likely the biggest thing we will be tracking, is the US President Donald Trump. I mean, the man's already cracking the whip from Washington, and there's very little place left on earth that is unaffected by US decisions. Now, of course, the most significant move that we will be looking for is whether or not he will do good on his threat of imposing tariffs, because the concern is that these tariffs could spark another bout of upward inflationary pressures, and that could place Africa under pressure.
Yes, definitely, Ilza. High interest rates for long will keep Africa's borrowing costs elevated, and this will exacerbate an ongoing funding squeeze. What it also does is will make Eurobond issuance difficult, and it will complicate matters for Africans who face significant external debt repayments this year. Sub-Saharan African redemptions are set to rise to over 6 billion this year, and this could force African sovereigns to enter the international capital markets, even though it would be very costly. We'll be looking at the likes of South Africa, Angola, and Namibia to refinance their debt this year.
And we know these high interest rates will continue to add economic pressure on already cash-strapped consumers. And so often, harsher economic conditions are often the spark for social unrest. And I mean, we saw last year, Africa saw a significant surge in conflicts on the continent. So are we at all concerned that these high interest rates for longer then will lead to possible further social unrest for the continent?
Yes, definitely, Ilza. There is a risk of social unrest spreading. While economic imbalances have improved since the COVID-19 pandemic, most nations will continue to experience significant budget deficits and high debt levels. And this will force African governments to consider raising taxes or cutting expenditure. And as we've seen in the case of Kenya and Nigeria, this could have severe consequences on the economy and its citizens.
Yeah, Kenya was quite hectic. I recall that. And obviously, a lot of the social unrest that we saw last year, I'm thinking, for example, Mozambique as well, was triggered by the outcome of certain elections. I know we went through a whole bag of elections last year. I don't know if there's any countries left that still need to go to the polling stations this year.
Yeah, definitely. There are a couple of elections this year. We'll be looking at Cameroon, the Ivory Coast, Tanzania, and Seychelles. And what's interesting to note is over the past year, rising discontent over the rising cost of living and poor governance has led to many voters punishing incumbent parties at the poll. So it'll be interesting to watch how that plays out this year, if that theme will remain.
And I think it's Paul Biya, right? He's been ruling since 1982. Yes. He's going to go for another term, right?
Yes, he's reportedly running for an 8th term, so that'll be interesting. Meanwhile, in Ivory Coast, you have President Ouattara. He's reportedly seeking a 4th term as well, but he could decide to, step aside and give a new generation a chance to lead. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out in the coming months. And
talk about having tenure as a president. That's kind of what it sounds like. I think another trend that is going to be very important to note for 2025 is how African states are going to navigate this global pushback or global push that we're seeing towards nationalism and the trade implications that go with that. I mean, it was a very big trend at Davos. We saw, for example, playing out with the US wanting to freeze all aid. I think they kind of backtracked on that a little bit. So it's a very real threat, and African states are going to have to find out how they're going to navigate that, because it's going to require some very robust diplomatic discussions. And the heads of state are going to have to decide, and the administrations, are they going to call and go for a very hard line, aligning very, very clearly with one side, or are they going to try and navigate this tightrope playing between the relations? Of course, I'm talking about the global tensions that's rising between the US and China and Russia and so forth. It creates a very uncertain and interesting dynamic, sure, and there's risks to this, as we saw with the US aid freeze. However, I do also think that it presents an opportunity for African states, if they get it right, to play a more significant role at the international table, really trying to just set their own states up for a better future in playing both sides of the coin. So, but it's going to take some very, very skilled negotiation and very robust discussion. So we're going to see how that plays out as well. By the way, if you have any specific questions on any of the topics that we discuss or anything else in Africa noteworthy, perhaps the DRC crisis that we are tracking at the moment, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. Tux and the rest of the team will be happy to look into that. But Tux, thank you very much for your time. It's going to be an interesting year for Africa, no doubt. And we're going to believe and hope for a positive one.
Thank you, Ilse. Thanks for having me.